This week's story at Fairmont Crest unfolds beneath a deceptively peaceful sky, the kind of fragile calm so tightly stretched that a single crack could bring everything crashing down. The pristine stone walkways, the meticulously trimmed trees, the elegant wine parties glowing under warm amber lights all seem to testify to stability, to the model image of an upper class that prides itself on moral standards and communal honor. And yet, beneath that carefully staged facade, one familiar name begins to move into the center of suspicion: Vernon. The man once regarded as a rare standard of integrity in a swamp of scandal, the steady pillar by Anita's side, the partner who helped her build a near-perfect symbol of enduring love, loyalty, and the ideal family. As rumors spread that Vernon has been secretly meeting with Sharon, a figure bound to both the glory and tragedy of the Articulate's past, more than a few people feel the foundations of Fairmont Crest tremble just slightly but unmistakably. If even Vernon is falling, then who in this place is left unstained enough to believe in? For days, closed doors, opulent living rooms, and dim corners of quiet bars become breeding grounds for half-finished sentences, exchanged looks, and subtle, knowing shrugs. Sharon, Anita's former bandmate, the friend who once stood beside her through countless tours, suddenly resurfaces in every whispered conversation. Why is Vernon choosing to meet Sharon instead of Anita? Why are these meetings happening so late at night? In a small secluded studio where music and memories can drown anyone who lets their guard slip, people start piecing together fragments. The fleeting look Vernon gave at a recent party, Sharon's strange silence whenever Barbara's name comes up, the slightly strained smile on Anita's lips whenever she hears about work sessions between her husband and her old friend. None of it is enough to condemn him, but all of it is enough to fuel a quiet, persistent question. Maybe Vernon is not the exception everyone thought he was. Anita senses the shift before anyone has the nerve to say it aloud. In her world, every detail carries weight. From the nights Vernon comes home a little later than usual to the distant look in his eyes when certain old songs play. As a woman who once stood center stage under blinding lights, who has witnessed every shade of betrayal, lies, and carefully crafted masks, Anita knows the signs of a secret taking shape. But this time, the shadow clinging to the edges of her life belongs to the one man she believed was her last unshakable wall. The more she tells herself that Vernon deserves her trust, the more unsettled she feels when old wounds resurface. The history of the Articulates, the unresolved pain surrounding Barbara, the gifted artist who died in a cloud of unanswered questions. Is history winding its way back into Fairmont Crest along some twisted path, woven from music, love, and guilt? Inside Sharon's small studio, where warm yellow light spills over old posters, instruments, microphones, and photographs of the Articulate's golden days, the air hums with a mix of nostalgia and unease. When Vernon appears there, it is not with the swagger of a man caught up in an affair, but with the tight shoulders of someone carrying a burden that has grown too heavy. Sharon quickly understands this is no simple rendezvous. Vernon hasn't come to escape his family. He's come to prepare something for it. He is learning music, carefully practicing each note of Anita's favorite song, hoping to use the melody tied to their shared past to bridge the distance of their present. On paper, it is a beautiful plan. A husband trying to make amends for accumulated distance, trying to say to his wife that he still sees her, still honors the years they spent fighting, to protect their image, their love, their family, their legacy. Watching Vernon practice, Sharon recognizes that behind the romantic gesture lies a quieter obsession. Vernon is not only afraid of losing Anita, he is afraid of losing everything they have constructed, a system of belief built around his name. He knows the world they live in does not forgive easily. Not a mistake, not a slip, not an old secret rising to the surface. Sharon is moved by his effort. A part of her wants to believe that in a place like Fairmont Crest, there are still people trying to hold on to decency. But the intimacy of the space, the sealed door, the music from another lifetime, the scent of old memories, all of it stirs up another layer of truth, one Vernon has tried very hard to bury. In that rare, softened moment, when his intention to surprise Anita seems almost enough to clear him in the court of public suspicion. Vernon suddenly feels the noose of guilt tighten. Some secrets are not awakened by other people's doubts, but by one's attempt to finally do the right thing. He realizes he cannot continue to play the part of the flawless man while the core of his past remains warped by a night he has always dismissed as a fleeting mistake, yet never truly confronted. And so, in the very place meant to prepare an act of love, Vernon confides in Sharon about a past no one else knows, as if some instinct is telling him that silence will only make what's coming more brutal. Sharon freezes when Vernon speaks Barbara's name. In her memory, Barbara is not just a member of the Articulates, not just an artistic soul with a rich voice and a deep heart, but a friend who left behind far too many questions. Barbara's death, the vague rumors, the internal conflicts about control, relationships, and the pressure of fame had haunted Sharon for years. Now, these scattered pieces begin to align as Vernon admits that before he and Anita became a couple, there was a moment of weakness with Barbara. One night, one choice, one secret buried in mutual silence, pressed down beneath layers of time and reputation. This confession is not merely a matter of private morality. It cuts straight into the most sensitive corner of the Articulate's shared history. Those last chaotic months when Barbara seemed frayed, emotionally exhausted, unsettled, weighed down by something she never fully voiced. Had anyone suspected? Were the tense rehearsals, the strange glances between Vernon and Barbara, those sudden quiet spells Sharon once noticed, without understanding them, all early warnings no one dared name? If Sharon had looked closer back then, asked harder questions, might Barbara's fate have been different? Or would the secret simply have exploded sooner? What truly makes Sharon tremble is not just the image of that long-ago night, but the timeline that starts forming in her mind. Leslie, the young woman now inadvertently at the center of covert investigations at Fairmont Crest, is Barbara's daughter. Leslie grew up with a father-shaped absence, with vague explanations, with the unsettling feeling that she was always standing outside of important truths the adults refused to share. When Sharon begins aligning the dates between Vernon's mistake and Leslie's birth, a cold clarity surges through her. The numbers, the months, the fractures in the band, Barbara's declining emotional state. It all stops feeling coincidental. What if Vernon is Leslie's biological father? Once that question appears, there is no way to erase it. Vernon understands this, which is why he cannot meet Sharon's eyes as she grasps the implications of his confession. What began as a late admission of past disloyalty before his marriage now expands into the possibility that the moral pillar of Fairmont Crest has a hidden child, born of a concealed connection to a woman whose death remains clouded. A secret like this does not only threaten a marriage, it tears at the carefully balanced social order of the entire community. Sharon is thrust into a searing dilemma. She is the keeper of Barbara's memory, the one who survived to carry the weight of watching everything fall apart when the band disintegrated and a brilliant life was lost without a full accounting. She is also Anita's friend, the woman who stood beside her through scandals, vicious press, and relentless public scrutiny. Now, between these two women stands a man holding a secret capable of detonating everything. If Sharon speaks, she could free Leslie from a life built on a mission, but she would shatter Anita's marriage, drag Vernon into a merciless storm, and once again exhume Barbara's name for public consumption instead of peace. If she stays silent, she protects certain lives but repeats the same pattern of silence that may have destroyed Barbara. While Sharon stands pinned between loyalty, justice, and guilt, Vernon leaves the studio and returns to Fairmont Crest like a man trying to hide the smell of smoke on his clothes. The luxurious house, the framed photos of a happy family, the awards, plaques, and community honors lining the walls all serve as cruel reminders that their lives no longer belong solely to them. Anita greets him with instinctive warmth, asking about his practice the way a wife wants to believe her husband's efforts are born purely of love. Vernon looks at her with a blend of tenderness and terror. The melody he is working so hard to perfect has already twisted, in his mind, into an echo of a confession left unfinished. Could the gift he's preparing be the very key that unlocks their collapse? Day by day, Anita feels the invisible distance growing, not because Vernon is cold, but because she sees in him a new kind of hauntedness. She knows the look of a man who carries responsibility. She has stood beside that version of him countless times, but this is different. It reminds her of Barbara's final days, when everyone kept insisting everything was fine, even as every frown, every sigh suggested the opposite. Anita mentally rewinds, Barbara crying alone backstage, tense arguments with no clear cause, the unnerving chill in the dressing room when certain topics came up. Back then, no one knew or no one admitted that something beyond the music was coming undone. Now those memories return like a warning. Will she repeat the same mistake, looking away until the truth crushes her? Elsewhere in Fairmont Crest, Leslie has no idea that hushed conversations and heavy confessions are circling around the question of her own origin. She has not come here to demand a father or manufacture scandal. She has been drawn into investigations about finances, inheritance, and the entangled interests of powerful residents. She is used to being seen as an outsider, a late arrival brushing against sacred ground claimed by people who built their lives on status and carefully curated narratives. But her very presence sharpens the edges of the secret. If she were to learn that the man this community reveres could be her father, would she see it as long overdue truth or the final insult to her mother's memory? Barbara's ghost begins to drift through Fairmont Crest, not as a literal apparition, but in the flicker of people's eyes when her name is mentioned. Sharon cannot stop wondering, was Barbara's death truly an isolated tragedy, or was it bound up with silence, with those who knew something and chose not to speak, with a pregnancy and a man too afraid to acknowledge his role? If Barbara confided in someone Sharon never knew about, if someone heard her fear and buried it for the sake of the band's reputation, then Vernon is not the only one at fault. And if others are quietly relieved that the secret has stayed buried all these years, they do not yet realize that Vernon's confession, made to the wrong person at the wrong time, has just shaken the ground beneath them. Fairmont Crest, so proud of its order and discretion, fails to notice that each of Vernon's hesitant steps, each of Sharon's distracted pauses, each of Anita's deepening frowns is forming a new undertow. Unspoken questions seep into the polished conversations. Who will be the first to suspect that Sharon is holding something back? Who will see that Leslie might be the missing piece of a story conveniently cleaned up after Barbara's death? And more importantly, when the truth finally claws its way out of the dark, who will be destroyed first? Anita, the betrayed wife, Vernon, the self-styled moral anchor, or Leslie, the living evidence of a sin she never chose? At this point, it is no longer simply a matter of whether Vernon loves Anita. He clearly does. His secret music lessons are proof of that. But can love save a marriage whose foundation is partly built on silence about a night with his wife's dead friend? If Anita learns the truth, will she see it as a distant mistake to be forgiven, or as proof that nothing she believed was ever entirely real? For a woman who has spent her life controlling her own story, defending her image, guarding a spotless legacy, can she accept the existence of a child conceived in that wrong, tied to a woman who was once her second family? Or will survival and self-preservation turn her into someone willing to erase anyone who threatens her name? A guiltless girl, a remorseful husband, even a dead friend's memory? In the nights that follow, Sharon barely sleeps. She listens to old Articulate's recordings, hears Barbara's voice like a reproach, hears Anita's laughter in the days before the weight of image and loyalty hardened her, hears Vernon's younger self as just another trusted friend beside them. She asks herself, if Barbara were still alive, would she want this truth exposed? Part of Sharon believes Barbara valued honesty. Another part knows that truths revealed too late can only destroy. The question hangs there. Whom is she protecting, and whom is she betraying? Vernon moves through his home like a man indebted to the walls. He looks at Anita, at their children, at the life they've fought to stabilize in a world that loves to watch people fall. He knows that if one fragment of his past is dragged into public view, everything will be redefined. He does not confess to Anita, not because he doubts her strength, but because he understands that no amount of context will soften the core fact. He slept with Barbara, and there is a real possibility he left a life behind in the aftermath. He tells himself he never schemed, never coerced, never meant harm, but will any of that matter to a woman who has built her life on the belief that some lines were never crossed? Every possible choice now cuts both ways. If Sharon tells Leslie, she will give her a true identity and throw her into the center of a storm. If she tells Anita, she may kill their friendship in an instant, but at least she will give Anita the dignity of choice. If she stays silent, she perpetuates the same buried voice pattern that may have crushed Barbara. Above all, one question still waits in the shadows. Was Barbara's death really just a personal tragedy? Or did someone take advantage of the chaos around her pregnancy and secret relationship with Vernon to rewrite the story into something cleaner? If records were altered, conversations erased, narratives adjusted to preserve reputations, then the truth about Leslie is not just a matter of paternity. It becomes the first loose thread in unraveling a long-running manipulation designed to protect those living behind Fairmont Crest's iron gates. In that scenario, Vernon is not only guilty, he is also a pawn in a much larger cover-up, where everyone has a reason to remain silent. This week, Beyond the Gates is not merely telling the story of a husband secretly taking music lessons to move his wife. It is forcing viewers to confront a far harsher reality. Every attempt at perfection comes at a cost, and when that cost is paid by distorting the past, burying women like Barbara, and letting someone like Leslie grow up in a void of identity, then eventually the very melody meant to heal becomes the soundtrack of collapse. As Sharon walks out of the studio that night carrying Vernon's secret, she understands she is holding the spark that could burn Fairmont Crest to the ground. Will she smother it, bury it, or accidentally drop it in a crowded room? And if the fire starts, will anyone still believe that Vernon is the only one who should burn?